I woke up in a hospital bed with a hole in my side and no one holding my hand. My throat was dry, my limbs heavy, and when I tried to speak, only air came out. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know what I had lost until I looked down and saw the bandage where my kidney used to be. No one was there when I opened my eyes. Not my mother, not my father, not even my brother. Just machines beeping and a nurse who looked startled to see I was still breathing. Hours later, my parents came. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't cry. My mother looked straight past me and asked the doctor about Ethan. My father stood at the door like he couldn't bring himself to walk in. And then I heard her say it, cold, flat, like I was an expired coupon she'd forgotten to use. She's awake. Not, how is she? Not, is she okay? Just that. And when I looked at her hand, she was wearing a brand new diamond ring, paid for with the insurance money from the crash that nearly killed me. The doctor was standing at the foot of my bed when my mother asked him as casually as someone ordering coffee. "Can we take her other kidney too?" I wasn't supposed to be awake. My throat was raw, my eyes barely open, but I heard every word. "She won't survive without it," he said. And my father, who once rocked me to sleep when I had night terrors, just replied, "Ethan can't wait." That's when my brother spoke. He was quiet, like he didn't want to be heard. "If no one finds out, it's fine. They were planning to let me die." That's when the door opened, and in walked Sarah, the hospital's legal representative, followed by two social workers and a plainclothes officer from the Department of Child Services. My mother blinked. "What's going on?" she asked. I sat up slowly. My voice cracked, but I said it loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "You should ask the doctor if he still has the audio file." My mother turned pale. "What audio file?" "The one where you told him to take my last kidney to save Ethan. The one where Dad said I wasn't worth it. The one where Ethan said, 'If no one finds out, it's fine.'" That one. Behind me, Sarah handed over a transcript. The officer read it. Out loud. Line by line. In front of every nurse, every intern, every administrator outside that glass wall. My mother's face drained of color. "She's lying," she hissed. And then the doctor stepped forward and said clearly, "No, she isn't." The entire hallway went silent. "I'm Grace Harper, and they thought I wouldn't survive. They were wrong. Before I tell you the whole story, I want to know you're really here. Leave a comment below, say, 'Still here,' or tell me where you're listening from. If this story hits you where it hurts, please subscribe. Because some stories deserve to be heard loud and clear, especially by the people who once tried to silence them. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. The rain fell in thick sheets, turning the streets of Savannah into silver rivers. I was behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, even though Ethan insisted on taking over. He always thought he was the better driver, the better student, the better everything. But I needed control of the car of something. He was rambling about his upcoming internship at Memorial Health. "They said I might get to assist in trauma cases, Grace. Real trauma cases. Can you imagine?" I barely heard him. My thumb was tracing the edges of the silver bracelet around my wrist, the one my grandmother gave me before she passed. It was tarnished now, but it still caught the light, like it had something left to say. I remembered the ethics paper I hadn't finished, the one on autonomy and medical consent. It felt ironic now. I stared through the windshield fogged with tension and rain. The last thing I saw was a truck. A blur of metal ignoring the red light hurtling toward us like it had no brakes and no God. Ethan screamed. I jerked the wheel. Tires shrieked. Glass exploded. Gasoline burned in my nose and lungs. Then silence. When I woke, the light was blinding sterile. Every part of me ached, but my right side throbbed with a hollow kind of pain I'd never known. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My lips cracked as I tried to form a word, Ethan, but it came out a rasp. I was alone. There were machines beeping, tubes snaking into my arms, and a bandage across my abdomen that told me something had been taken. Something inside me was gone. I knew it. I felt the absence like a phantom limb. I turned my head slowly. No bracelet. It had been cut off, lost. I had been opened up and stripped inside and out. Later hours a day they came, Linda and David, my parents. Linda's perfume reached me before her voice did, overly sweet and cloying. She entered without hesitation, heels clicking like nothing about this room was sacred. She glanced at me for half a second, then turned to the doctor standing near the monitor. "She's awake." The doctor nodded. Linda didn't speak to me, didn't touch me, didn't even look at me again. "Any update on Ethan?" she asked. David stood just outside the doorway, arms folded. He didn't step in. He didn't ask how I was. His eyes darted around like he wanted to be anywhere else. "He can't miss this internship," David said softly, like it was a fact of nature. I watched Linda's hand brush her hip, saw the flash of something new on her finger. A large, gleaming diamond ring, bigger than the one she wore before. I stared at it, blinking slowly, and realized what it meant. They'd used the insurance money. Not for my care. For her finger. I wasn't the miracle child. I was the accident. The spare. A body that happened to survive long enough to pay for someone else's future. That night, alone again, I whispered to myself, even though I could barely make a sound, "If I survive this, I'll never let them see me as a burden again." The morphine drip dulled my body but not my ears. The night was quiet until it wasn't. Footsteps. A low murmur. I turned my head toward the door. It was slightly ajar. "She's stable," a male voice said. The doctor, I thought. Linda's voice came next. Calm. Clinical. "So, if we take the other kidney?" A pause. "She won't survive." The doctor replied, hesitant. "She needs at least one." David's voice joined, low and firm. "Ethan can't live like this. He has a future. She doesn't." I couldn't breathe, not from pain but from horror. Linda again. "She's just a burden. This is the first useful thing she's ever done." I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek. The taste of blood flooded my mouth. I didn't move. I couldn't. But every cell in me screamed. They were bargaining over my body like I was a spare part, like I wasn't still here listening, like I was already dead. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, the rhythmic beeping of the monitor, my only anchor to this world. At one point, a nurse came in to adjust the IV. She didn't meet my eyes. The next morning, Linda swept into the room like nothing had happened. She looked at the chart, adjusted the blanket, never once glancing at my face. She left a bag of toiletries on the table beside me, cheap perfume and lotion in a crumpled plastic bag, the kind of gift you give when guilt is too expensive. The scent filled the room and made me nauseous. Later, I heard two nurses talking in the hallway just outside my door. "Did you hear the insurance payout got deposited into their joint account? Nothing set aside for the girl." "Figures," the other one whispered. "She's just the sister." I closed my eyes. My body ached, but that was nothing compared to what bloomed inside my chest, betrayal layered over betrayal. I was invisible, a resource, a donor, a cautionary tale, but not a daughter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid they'd make the choice for me, and I promised myself, they will not take anything else, not one more piece, not even a breath. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. I began to remember who I was, not the quiet, compliant girl who always gave up her seat at the table. I was someone who saw everything, who felt everything, who was still here. I would survive, but not for them, for me. It was sometime between dusk and dawn when I felt at a hand. Not cold and clinical like the nurses who adjusted my IV without ever meeting my gaze. This hand was warm, calloused, and still somehow gentle. It rested lightly over mine, like it had been waiting. I turned my head slowly and saw her. An older woman in worn scrubs and orthopedic shoes. Her name tag read, M. Brooks. She smiled, not politely, not professionally, but like a real person who saw me. You're still here, she whispered. Don't let them take that from you. It was the first time someone had acknowledged that I was not just surviving but choosing to stay. With what little strength I had, I scratched out a message on the notepad by my bedside. The words came out slow, misshapen. Need to see social worker. Margaret read it and nodded, her eyes softening with something close to fury. You will? True to her word, by the following afternoon, a woman in a gray cardigan and dark slacks appeared in my room. She was young, but her eyes were already older than mine. Her name was Sarah. She pulled up a chair beside me and opened a folder. You asked to speak with someone, she said gently. My fingers trembled as I reached for the pen. I wrote slowly, deliberately, because this time the truth had weight. My parents tried to kill me. They were going to take my second kidney. Sarah didn't flinch. She listened. Really listened without interrupting or questioning my sanity. I told her about the conversation I overheard through the door about the way my mother had looked past me as if I were already gone. I told her about the new diamond ring, the insurance money, the nurses whispering about where it went. When I was done, she reached into her bag and took out a sealed envelope. We have a recording, she said quietly. The attending physician had his suspicions and turned on his phone. He sent this to us. She handed me a pair of earbuds and helped me connect the USB to the hospital laptop. The file was named with a timestamp. I pressed play. Linda's voice came through first. Crisp, icy. So if we take the other kidney? The doctor's voice was wary. She won't survive. David responded like someone reading a weather report. Ethan needs it. He can't wait. Then Linda again. She's just a burden. This will be the only meaningful thing she ever does. The words hit harder the second time. There was no mistaking the tone, the intention, or the absolute lack of humanity. They weren't talking about me like I was a daughter. They were talking about me like I was inventory. Sarah paused the playback. Do you want to press charges? She asked. I shook my head, slowly. Not because I doubted what they did. Not because they didn't deserve prison. But because I didn't want to waste another second of my life inside their orbit. I just want them out of my life, I wrote. She nodded. Then that's what we'll do. You're safe now. They don't have legal access to you anymore. And they never will again. That evening, Linda returned. She wasn't expecting a security guard stationed outside my door. I'm her mother, she snapped, trying to push past. She's not taking visitors, the guard replied flatly. She screamed something then, something about betrayal, about loyalty, about how I was still hers. I didn't get up. I didn't even flinch. I simply turned my face toward the window, letting the sunlight hit my skin. For the first time, I felt the thin line between existence and choice. And I realized I had crossed it. She didn't own me. Not anymore. When I left the hospital, it wasn't with a ceremony or balloons. No one cheered. No one held the door open. I walked out slowly, my side still sore from surgery, my heart still bruised in places no X-ray could see. Margaret met me in the lobby with a paper bag of clothes and a familiar glint of silver in her palm. I kept it safe, she said, placing the bracelet in my hand. It fell under the ICU bed your first night. I thought you'd want it. I nodded, unable to speak. I slipped it back onto my wrist, the metal cool and comforting against my skin. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded me that I had survived. I was taken to a temporary housing unit on the outskirts of Savannah. The building was tired. The carpet smelled like bleach. The wallpaper was peeling. But the door locked from the inside, and no one called me burden here. The next morning, I stood in line at the social services office and filled out the paperwork. When the clerk asked my name, I hesitated only a moment. Grace Harper, I said. She looked up. Grace? I nodded. It's who I am now. The clerk didn't smile. She just typed. But I walked out feeling like I had just buried Emma in that office and walked away a little bit taller. That first night in a bed that smelled like someone else's sorrow, I lay awake and thought about Ethan. About the way he used to sneak extra rolls from the dinner table and hide them in my backpack. About how he used to shield me from Dad's yelling when I was little. But then I remembered his voice on the recording, soft, silent, complicit. He had the power to stop them, to say no. And he didn't. I felt the betrayal all over again, not sharp like a knife, but deep like a bone bruise. One that would fade, but never quite disappear. I got a job at a 24-hour bookstore on Broughton Street. Night shifts. I mopped floors, restocked shelves, and cleaned bathrooms. After 3 a.m., the store went quiet. I'd sneak into the aisles and read old novels under the flickering lights, stories about women who became their own heroes. I enrolled in GED courses online. Each night I printed out homework assignments at the public library, scribbling answers in the margins like my life depended on them. I began saving every penny I could. Quarters, dimes, even nickels. I dropped them into an old peanut butter jar beneath my bed. Each coin felt like a step away from who I had been and toward who I was becoming. One night a boy, about 10, wandered into the store, eyes wide and wet. He couldn't find his mom. He looked scared in the way I used to feel all the time. I knelt beside him and picked a book from the shelf. "Want to hear a story?" He nodded, sniffling. I read aloud, slowly, softly. He calmed down. His mother returned minutes later, breathless and apologetic. After they left, I sat on the floor behind the register and realized I hadn't flinched when the woman raised her voice. I hadn't curled in on myself. I hadn't been afraid. Something had changed. I wasn't Emma, the disposable daughter. I wasn't the girl in the hospital bed waiting for permission to exist. I was Grace, and I was learning that I didn't need validation to be good. I could be kind and strong and enough all by myself. And for the first time in my life, I believed I could survive without being someone else's afterthought. September came early that year, colder than usual, with winds that crept under doors and tugged at sleeves like warnings. I had just finished reorganizing the coat rack in the corner of my small apartment when I decided to clear out the closet. The shelves hadn't been touched in months, cluttered with boxes of secondhand donations and dusty GED prep books. As I reached behind a warped piece of paneling, my hand hit something smooth, an envelope thick and deliberately tucked away. It was brown, sealed, and labeled in handwriting I recognized instantly. "Grace, when you're ready." My stomach dropped. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, turning it over in my hands. Inside was a small black USB drive and a single sheet of paper. Sarah's words were short but steady, just like her. "This is the original file from the hospital. Your proof, your right to remember. Use it however you need to. It's yours now." The USB felt heavier than it should have. I slid it into the pocket of my jacket and walked 6 blocks to the downtown library. It was quiet at this hour, only the soft clicking of keyboards and the occasional squeak of a chair. I took the farthest computer in the back near the window. When the screen loaded, I opened the file. Linda's voice pierced through the headphones without hesitation. "If we take the other kidney," silence. David responded, calm and casual. "Ethan has a future. He can't wait." Then Linda again, her tone colder than I remembered. "Emma is a burden. This will be the only meaningful thing she ever does." And finally, the voice I didn't expect to hear. "Not like that. Not with those words. If no one finds out." "Then it's fine," Ethan said. I pulled the headphones out. The sound of the library returned, but my heart was pounding too loudly to hear any of it. The boy I used to build blanket forts with. The one who stayed up with me when I had night terrors. The one who sat next to me at Grandma's funeral and held my hand without a word. That boy was gone. He had heard them planning my death and said nothing. I sat on the library's stone bench for nearly 3 hours. It began to rain, a light mist that turned into a steady drizzle, but I didn't move. At some point, a man in a torn coat shuffled past me. He didn't say a word, just handed me a folded umbrella and kept walking. I never saw his face, but in that moment, his small act of kindness felt more like family than anything I'd ever known. When I finally returned to my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I picked up a marker and wrote on the wall above my bed, "We are not what they define us to be." That night, I began sketching out ideas on scrap paper. A program, a place, a foundation. I didn't want to just survive anymore, I wanted to build a refuge for kids like me. For anyone who had ever been called worthless, forgotten, or erased by the people who should have protected them. They tried to end me, and now I would build something they couldn't touch. I wasn't a victim, not anymore. I was someone with purpose. I didn't need Ethan to understand or forgive me. I only needed him to see me and realize I had become everything they never expected. 2 years passed. The bookstore closed down during a recession, but I had already moved on. Lana, a girl I met through a GED night course, became my closest ally. She'd survived her own version of hell, locked in closets, called a mistake, nearly sent to a group home after her parents disappeared. We didn't have the same scars, but we understood each other's silences. Together we started the Grace Harper Foundation. It began small, just 2 desks in a rented office above a pawn shop on Congress Street. The walls were yellowed, the carpet worn, but the mission was solid. We offered housing leads, emergency legal aid, GED, tutoring, trauma counseling, referrals. We made a place where burden wasn't a word used to shame, but to understand and transform. Every file we opened, every thank you letter from kids who made it out made the pain of my past feel not worth it, but used. Nothing was wasted if it helped someone else survive. I wasn't just living anymore. I was building. I had become the safety net I'd once needed. Then one afternoon, Lana stepped into my office holding a manila folder. She didn't speak, just handed it to me and waited. I opened it. At the top of the application form was a name written in block letters, Ethan Harper. No photo, no resume, just his name, bold and unfamiliar. I stared at it, trying to make sense of why he would apply here. Lana spoke softly, as if we were standing at the edge of a frozen lake. "You want me to toss it?" I shook my head. "We follow protocol. I'll handle the interview." Later that evening, I ran a quiet background check. Ethan had been dismissed from his internship 6 months after I left the hospital. Issues with paperwork, unprofessional behavior, several minor ethics violations. He'd applied to half a dozen community clinics, but nothing stuck. And after the insurance fraud case surfaced, after Sarah's report reached Child Protective Services and the state board, our family's name lost its shine. No more funding, no more favors. Ethan was on his own. I walked through the office in the dark, my hands trembling more from memory than fear. I opened the drawer in my desk and pulled out the black USB. The same one from the library, the same one that held my past like a loaded gun. For the first time since that hospital bed, I plugged it back in. I listened again to the voices, but this time, I didn't feel like the girl lying helpless beneath white sheets. I heard them from a place of power. I wasn't pleading anymore. I was bearing witness. I let the sound run until it reached the end, where my own shallow breathing from the oxygen mask whispered like wind through a cracked door. I closed the laptop and placed the USB back in the drawer. Ethan was coming to my office, and this time I would be the one asking the questions. It was raining again, the kind of soft, unrelenting rain that blurred the world into streaks of gray. I stood by the window of the Foundation's second-floor office, watching droplets run down the pane like veins on skin. The interview was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. sharp. I had arrived an hour earlier. The room was small, lined with glass walls that made everything feel exposed. In the center stood a single wooden table, 2 chairs and a laptop already set up. The USB sat inside the drawer, its black plastic casing worn smooth from years of being handled, but never played again until now. At 8:58, the elevator dinged. I turned my back to the window and waited. Ethan walked in 2 minutes late, slightly soaked, his collar misaligned, and his shoes scuffed in a way that screamed both pride and desperation. He looked older, not just by time but by failure. He scanned the room and gave me a practiced nod, polite but detached. He didn't recognize me. I had grown my hair long. I wore clothes that didn't cling to my silence. I had built a name he didn't associate with the girl whose body he once watched be dismantled without protest. He sat down across from me. Grace Harper. Yes. He adjusted his sleeves. Thank you for the opportunity. I leaned forward. Do you think a person should ever be labeled a burden simply because their body failed them? He blinked, thrown off by the question. I think that depends on the context. Does it? I asked, reaching into the drawer. I pulled out the USB, held it between two fingers, and inserted it into the laptop. He shifted uncomfortably as the screen lit up. I clicked the audio file and turned the volume up just enough to be inescapable. Linda's voice filled the room. So, if we take the other kidney, David followed, Ethan has a future. Linda again. Emma is a burden. This is the only meaningful thing she'll ever do. Then his own voice, quiet, complicit, unmistakable. If no one finds out, then it's fine. His face changed in an instant. Every defense he had built cracked under the weight of that one line. His mouth opened, then closed again. I remember everything I said, and I'm the only one who survived to tell it. His eyes finally met mine, truly met them, and I watched recognition settle into him like dust. He saw it, the scar beneath my blouse, the posture I held now, the steadiness in my voice that once trembled every time someone raised theirs. Emma, he whispered. No, I said calmly. My name is Grace. He swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd make it. I thought they were just talking. I didn't think it would really happen. And so you said nothing. I was scared. So was I replied. But I was the one in the bed, not the one holding the door shut. He looked down, ashamed. I've lost everything. After the investigation, Dad cut me off. Mom left. I've been trying to start over. I didn't know where else to go. I studied him. His face was worn but not broken. His words were smooth but not apologetic. I didn't bring you here to humiliate you, I said. I brought you here because I wanted you to see what I've built, what I've become. I closed the laptop. But we don't hire people who stay silent when it matters. We protect the ones who were silenced. He didn't speak. You can go now, I said, voice even. He stood slowly. I didn't come to hurt you. I really didn't. I believe you, I said. But your silence did. He nodded, once turned and walked to the door. Before he left, he glanced over his shoulder. I never said I was sorry, he murmured. You didn't have to, I said. You proved it. The door closed behind him with a soft thud. I didn't cry. I didn't exhale. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, letting the quiet settle into the corners of the room. He would carry the truth now, and I would carry nothing of him. The rain hadn't let up. I stayed in the office after Ethan left, sitting at my desk while the building emptied. The city blurred through the window, streaks of light bending in the downpour. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the old photo of my grandmother, the only person who had ever looked at me and seen light. I traced her face with my thumb and smiled faintly. Then I opened my inbox. Among the usual applications and donation receipts was an email with the subject line, "Thank you for saving me." It was from Marlene, a girl we'd helped 6 months ago after she escaped a home where her parents had tried to sell her kidney to cover debts. She was now living in Ohio with a foster family and had just been accepted to college. Grace, she wrote, you gave me a name to believe in. Because of you, I'm still alive. I looked up at the wooden plaque hanging above the window. Simple, carved by hand. Grace means rise. I whispered it under my breath, a truth I now understood in every cell of my being. I took the long way home that night, stopping by the Savannah River. I hadn't come here since the day I almost didn't go back. The current moved strong and silent, a mirror to everything I'd survived. I pulled the bracelet off my wrist, kissed the smooth silver, and held it tightly for a moment. Then I put it back on, not as a memory of who I had been, but as an emblem of who I had chosen to become. The wind picked up. My coat flared behind me. I didn't feel small standing there anymore. My phone buzzed. "Lana." She sounded breathless. "You're not going to believe this. That university in Vermont, they want to adopt our curriculum into a full scholarship program. They asked who the founder is." I smiled, slow and sure. "Tell them to spell it exactly as it is." She laughed. "How's that Grace Harper?" I said. "My name is Grace Harper." And this time I said it not to forget where I came from, but to honor everything I had overcome. Justice didn't come with sirens. It came with breath, with reclaiming what was stolen, with choosing to stay when it would have been easier to disappear. They tried to end me, but I lived, and I rewrote what it means to be worthy. A week after Ethan walked out of my office, a thick envelope arrived with no return address. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar at first, but the way my name was written, Grace Harper, felt deliberate. The postmark said, Tampa, Florida. I stared at it for several minutes before opening it. Inside was a folded stack of cream-colored paper, slightly smudged as if written in haste. The handwriting slanted downward, uneven and tight, but I would have recognized it anywhere. It was from Linda. She didn't open with pleasantries or apologies. She didn't even call me Emma. She began by saying David had passed away a year ago from heart failure. There was no funeral. No one wanted to come. She wrote that since I disappeared, she had been cast out by the family. The extended relatives who once praised Ethan stopped returning her calls after the recording surfaced. Her sisters, her cousins, even her church group all turned their backs. The truth made her radioactive. She admitted to spending the insurance payout on a ring. She claimed it wasn't about vanity, but desperation. She said survival made her selfish. She blamed Ethan at first, but eventually realized she had made the choices herself. She didn't ask for forgiveness. In fact, near the end, she wrote, "I know you probably won't read this far. But if you did, then you survived in a way I never could. And maybe that means I did one thing right by leaving you behind." Enclosed in the envelope was a small photograph, worn and yellowing. I was about 5 years old in the picture, sitting in the grass with a popsicle dripping down my arm. It was wrapped in a linen handkerchief embroidered with the initials EH. Beneath the photo she had written, "I didn't keep the bracelet. Maybe it found its way back to someone who deserved it." I didn't cry. I read the letter 3 times. My hands shook slightly when I folded it and slipped it into the drawer of my desk. I didn't call her. I didn't write back. It wasn't anger that kept me from responding. It was peace. There was nothing left to reclaim. Later that day, I made a copy of the letter and added it to the official training binder under the title Grace Harper Protection Protocol. It was a program we had recently developed for staff and volunteers, guidelines for how to navigate threats from toxic family members of our clients, how to recognize emotional blackmail, how to draw boundaries. Linda's letter wasn't a confession, it was a case study, a reminder that even the people who birth us can do us harm, and even the ones who harm us can leave behind a warning to others. Forgiveness didn't mean I had to invite her back in. Sometimes forgiveness just means deciding someone doesn't get to live rent-free in your head anymore. And that day I made room in mine for better things. April brought spring winds and pale light over Savannah, and with it a quiet sort of milestone. I stood on the center of the Savannah Bridge, looking out over the river, where the current split and curled like a silver ribbon through the city. We had organized a small event for the launch of the Silver Bracelet Legacy Scholarship, a fund created for youth who had been discarded, disowned, or erased by their families. It was a soft gathering, nothing grand. Just a few staff, some alumni, and a group of kids who had found shelter in our walls. They stood along the railing, each holding a tiny silver bracelet made of aluminum. We had stamped the words "Still Here" on everyone. At my signal, we dropped them into the water. I didn't prepare a speech. I just stepped forward and spoke from the place that used to ache the most. I was once called a burden. They told a doctor to take my life so someone else could live. But I lived, and I found a reason for it. No one clapped. No one needed to. The river caught every bracelet, carried them forward away from the bridge and out toward the sea, toward something better. I scanned the small crowd below. That's when I saw her. A woman stood off to the side on the edge of the park, half in shadow, half in light. She wore a brown coat, the kind I hadn't seen in years, and held a gray umbrella in one hand. Her posture was stiff, her face mostly obscured by the distance. But I knew. She didn't approach, she didn't interrupt, she just watched, silently, until the event ended. Then she turned and walked away. I didn't need confirmation. I knew it was her. And I knew that this time her silence wasn't meant to erase me. After the ceremony, I climbed the railing carefully, slowly, and sat on the edge of the bridge, letting the wind push my hair back from my face. I pulled the real bracelet from my wrist. The silver was warm from the heat of my skin. I kissed the inside curve, ran my thumb over the tiny dent near the clasp, and held it over the water. Then gently, I let it go. It sank slowly, caught a glimmer of light, and disappeared beneath the surface. I whispered into the air, "Grandma, I did it, just like you knew I would." For a long moment I sat in silence, legs dangling over the water, letting the sun touch my skin. A horn honked in the distance. Lana stood next to the car, waving, her face open and steady. I climbed down, walked across the bridge, and slid into the passenger seat. We drove away slowly, the river stretching behind us. At the office, there were files waiting. New kids, new stories, new lives to help carry forward. They weren't burdens. They were survivors. And so was I. I was no longer the girl in the hospital bed. I was no longer the ghost in the hallway. I was no longer the secret, or the shame, or the sacrifice. I was the architect of a second chance for myself and for others like me. My name is Grace Harper, and I've earned every letter. Sometimes survival isn't just about making it through the fire, it's about choosing who you'll become after the ashes settle. Pain may leave scars, but those scars can become the blueprint for strength, clarity, and purpose. We don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to choose the life we build beyond them. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share your perspective, and don't forget to follow or subscribe. Your presence truly means more than you know.